All right, what is going on, you Bumble and Bulbasaur? So Sacramento Regionals just concluded over the weekend. I managed to get top 8 in the tournament myself. Colorless Lugia absolutely dominated the tournament. 4 of them in top 8. It took the whole thing down, so we're going to be talking about that. Going to be talking about the metagame percentages for the tournament, where I expect them to go moving forward. Lille Regionals is coming up just this weekend, so I'm going to give my thoughts on where I think things are going to adjust going into Lille. And then we'll take a look at the top 8 deck lists, get my thought on the tech cards that were included in some of the decks, what I like, what I didn't like, and what I think maybe should be played moving forward. First, I want to give a big shout out to GameGrid SLC. If you guys need any Paradox Rift sealed product, go get it over at GameGridSLC.com. They've got you covered, and you can use code AzulGG over there for 5% off as well. GameGridSLC.com. Link, of course, will be in the description. So to start off with, let's take a look at the metagame for this tournament. So this is the day 1 metagame breakdown here from Sacramento. It's just the top 6 decks, but we can kind of make some guesses as to what would be like 7th, 8th, you know, something like Mew isn't here, so Mew's probably there, maybe Rapid Strike, whatever it might be. But this is the top 6 decks from the tournament. Lost Box was number 1 at 14%. My prediction for Lost Box would be around 10%. It did see a pretty big spike, though, from Peoria. Not the same kind of spike that we saw, though, after it won Pittsburgh. So I was kind of like, After Lost Box won Pittsburgh, there wasn't like a huge spike, but it seems like a lot of people decided to pick it up after it won Peoria, 14%. Charizard at the 14% as well. It was 15 in Peoria. It only came down 1%. A lot of people still loving the Charizard. Still locked in on it going into Sacramento. Stuck to it despite its like not terrible performance at Peoria, but there was like 0 in top 8 for it being the most popular deck. Didn't have a ridiculously good conversion rate or anything like that. So I thought it would come down to like 12%, but stuck at the 14%. Basically the same thing as Peoria. Miraidon, basically the same thing as well. It was 12 in Peoria, 13 here in Sacramento. Miraidon overall didn't have this felt like the Charizard of the tournament. It showed up at 13%, 0 top 8s, but there's still 2 in top 16. So it's like still did solid. It's going to be tough for Miraidon to compete against 14% Lost Box. And it was Lost Box was a way bigger percentage of the meta in day 2 as well. So Miraidon had it tough going into day 2 for sure. Gardevoir around the 12%. My prediction was like 10 to 12. Stuck it out. Did okay as well. There was 1 in top 8. Chi and Pao at the 11%. I believe the highest placing one was only in top 16. There was 1 in top 16. Grant Shen sticking it out with the Chi and Pao from a top 8 in Peoria to a top 16 here in Sacramento. Pretty good back-to-back placements there for Grant. And then Lugia was the hard drop-off from Peoria, down to 8%. My prediction for Lugia would be around 10%, down to 8%. But it didn't stop Lugia from having a really good tournament run. Like I said, 4 of them were in the top 8, which is pretty ridiculous. And if we look at the day 2 percentages, or actually get my last thoughts one more time. So my predictions for all these were Lugia 10%, Chi and Pao about 8%, was at 11, Guardy 10 to 12, Miraidon 12, Charizard 12, Lost Box 10. So my numbers weren't, I could have been closer, I think. I think maybe the one thing I definitely could have guessed a little bit better on would have been a little bit higher of a Lost Box percentage. Probably should have predicted at least 12. Predicted 10, it was 14, so I definitely missed something there. I could have definitely predicted a little bit higher. I just don't feel like Lost Box is like one of those decks that gains a lot of traction even when it does very well. It usually still stays around the same numbers, I feel like, most of the time. Definitely got a little bit of a boost though from when it won Peoria, as you can see here, as in Sacramento was 14%. And then day 2, things changed up a little bit. Lost Box came in at 22% of the meta in day 2. Charizard dropped to 11, Charizard dropped to 12 from 14, Guardy to 11 from 12, Chi and Pao 10 from 11, Miraidon from 13 down to 8. So not a great conversion rate for the Miraidon, but Lost Box was the most popular deck. Pretty tough matchup. Charizard can also be tough, and I'm sure the Charizard list adjusted a little bit to deal with the Miraidon's paths to the peaks a little bit more, adding more stadiums, stuff like that. I think the highest placing Charizard list also had a B-Barrel line in it. I'm not 100% sure if that was I think that was the highest placing Charizard list. Had a 2-2 B-Barrel line in it over the Pidgeot, which definitely helps out against stuff like Path to the Peak. And then Lugia stayed at that 8% from day 1 to day 2. So there was only 11 Lugias in day 2 overall. And there was 4 in top 8, which is just a ridiculous conversion from 11 in day 2 to 4 in the top 8. It's like a third of the Lugia players made top 8, which is absolutely absurd. But I love to see it because I've been a big fan of Colorless Lugia for a while. I was kind of second guessing myself on how good I thought the deck was with how poor it had been performing recently. But it showed up big time here, which, like, even though I didn't play Colorless Lugia and plays with it myself, it's definitely one of those things where it's like nice to be reassured that my assessment of decks and assessment of the format overall isn't too far off from what is actually doing well in the tournament. So it's always like nice to see on my end of things, where it's like, I didn't play the Colorless Lugia, I didn't perform with the Colorless Lugia, but I think the Colorless Lugia is really good. So seeing it perform very well, I was like, okay, my idea of what is good in the Pokemon TCG is still on track, or seems to be. All right, so that was the meta game. But now let's take a look at some of these top 8 deck lists, and we may as well start with the first place list here from Alexander, and we'll take a look at all the Lugia decks first, I think, because we can talk about all the little individual cards specifically, what some played, what some didn't play. So Alexander played the Luxray. They all played Luxray, actually, I believe, except Dominic. No, Dominic played as well. Who didn't play? Oh, Kerr. Charlie Kerr did not play the Luxray. Everyone else played Luxray, so everyone else had an advantage in the Luxray, or in the Lugia mirrors, against Charlie. Yeah, Alexander played the Luxray, and there's not too much different. The one thing that stood out to me as like a consistent now is everyone's playing the 15 energy across the board. There was some lists rocking 16 for a little while earlier on in the format, but most people have come down to that 15 number, and that seems to be where pretty much everyone has settled. And from what I've played with the deck as well, I've come down to the 15 number myself, and I've never really felt kind of like I'm running out of energy. I could maybe see, especially if you play the Radiant Charizard, because the Radiant Charizard is such an efficient attacker for just 1 energy, I could actually see going down to 14 energy, possibly. It'd be something worth trying out. I don't know if it's actually correct though or not. But yeah, Alexander, 15 energy, the Luxray, the Mew. I think one constant we see between all the lists is they all played the Mew. We can actually check. They all played Mew, and they all played the Drapion. So Drapion's really important for not just the Mew matchup, but also the Gardevoir matchup. So everyone played the Mew, everyone played the Drapion. The cards that stood out that not everyone played the Weirdeer. Only Dorian was the player to not rock the Weirdeer, but Dorian did have the Radiant Art and the Luxray, and I believe was the only player. Let me check. No, Dominic also had the Charizard and the Luxray. So 2 of them had Charizard and Luxray. Kerr only played the Charizard. And then Alexander did not play the Charizard, and Dorian did not play the Weirdeer. But besides that, all the lists are pretty similar, right? Besides those, like the tech Pokemon, all the lists are pretty similar. Some played 3 boss, some played 4 boss. None of them played Pumpkaboo. Path really isn't that popular of a card right now. Lost Tina was like the big #1 Path deck for a little while, but it fell off pretty hard pretty recently. So there's really no Path to be overly scared of. Miraidon still has the Path to the Peak, but it feels like most people have come to the consensus that Colorless Lugia kind of just unfavored against Miraidon, whether you have a Pumpkaboo or don't. So is it really worth it teching for a matchup you're already unfavored against? Probably not. So if that's how you feel about the matchup, I think it makes sense to not include Pumpkaboo if the #1 path to the peak deck is already an unfavorable matchup. There's no real reason to play the Pumpkaboo. But if like Lost Tina or Mew get really popular again, then I think you'd want to put the Path to the Peak back in deck. But the Double Clap Stadium is just so powerful in the Lugia deck to get rid of your liabilities as the game progresses off your field, namely the Luminion at some point. So it's hard to justify cutting a Collapse. Maybe you'd cut a Mezagoza, I guess. That'd be like a possibility. You could cut the Mezagoza instead. Dominic definitely had the most interesting list of them, I guess, overall, because had the Ditto in there, which we don't see very often. And actually, I think this list on the site might be incorrect. I'm gonna go over to the Limitless site right now, because I'm pretty sure Dominic on Limitless, I think it said Dominic played the Squawkabilly. Yeah. So on this list right here, there's no Squawkabilly, but on the list on Limitless, there is a Squawkabilly. I'm pretty sure Dominic did play the Squawkabilly, so it's just -1 Lugia V plus a Squawkabilly EX. But definitely the most interesting list. Those are like some interesting cards that Dominic had in here. The Squawkabilly and the Ditto. The Ditto, I'm not sure how I feel about. For anyone who doesn't know what the Ditto does, if it's your first turn and the Ditto's in your active spot, it can become any Pokemon out of your deck. Basically, you switch it, you shuffle it into you discard it, and you get a Pokemon out of your deck, and you put that in the active spot. It's like okay. It's kind of like a more neutral starter. The idea behind it is kind of like, well, you sometimes want to have Lugia V in your active, but not all the time. So then if you open the Ditto, it can become a Lugia V, or you can leave it as a Ditto. Or you can make it into something like a Snorlax or something like that. But you do have to do it on your first turn. And the Lugia deck doesn't play a ton of like switch outs. You do have like the jet energies and stuff, but you don't really want to like jet a 1 prizer into your active to waste your energy attachment for a turn, depending on the situation. So yeah, the Ditto feels a little gimmicky to me. Not a huge fan of the Ditto. The Squawkabilly is something I can definitely get a little bit more behind. A more aggressive way to kind of get extra cards on your first turn of the game, and also get Archeops to your discard pile. Because you can like go Nest Ball for the Squawkabilly, and then Squawkabilly away the hand. Like if you open up your hand going first and you have an Iono plus double Archeops, but you have no like Ultra Ball, then you're not on the following turn, you're not gonna be able to like you know, get rid of those Archeops. But if you have the Squawkabilly or a Nest Ball, that can go get the Squawkabilly, and then you can Squawkabilly away the hand, get rid of the Archeops, and get those in the discard pile as soon as possible. Same thing if you go second as well, like if you research, but you don't research away any Archeops, but you research into some Archeops, now you can put Squawkabilly in play, get rid of those Archeops, because you might get Iono next turn, and you might not be able to play that follow-up research or whatever to get the Archeops in the discard pile. So it's just like another tool to get the Archeops in the discard pile, but it can only be used on your first turn of the game. And whenever I've played the Squawkabilly, I've always found that it feels not like you just don't use it. Like it has that utility of it for that first turn to get more outs of getting your Archeops in the discard pile, but it almost like never comes up where you actually utilize the Squawkabilly, or very few times. But yeah, ditto. Wasn't a huge fan of seeing that. Does have the Luxray, does have the Radiant Charizard. Also only has 2 Snorlax. I think this might be the only list actually that has the 2 Snorlax. I do prefer, personally, like I do like the Radiant Charizard before the 3rd Snorlax, but I can definitely see the argument for having 3 Snorlax and the Radiant Charizard. I don't know. Usually you don't need, usually you don't need 2 Snorlax and the Radiant Charizard, or 3 Snorlax and a Radiant Charizard in a game. Usually 2 Snorlax plus Radiant Charizard is more than enough, but an idea behind like playing 3 Snorlax over the 2 is that you more consistently will have that back-to-back Snorlax game plan to execute, because if you prize a Snorlax, then you're just kind of screwed, because you're probably not going to draw into it before you would actually be able to utilize it. So that's kind of, I think, the main reason to play 3 Snorlax is like prizing it becomes a potential issue. Not all games you need 2 Snorlax, but having the back-to-back Snorlax against a lot of matchups is very powerful. So that's the reason you'd want to play 3. But I think the Radiant Charizard always should come before the 3rd Snorlax. And I think that's it for the Lugia, Colorless Lugia list. There's a bunch of little things to that are different among the lists, things to try out. Dorian was the only one playing the Great Balls, the 4 Great Ball builds. I'm personally a fan of the Great Balls. Every time I play with Great Balls versus Nest Balls, Great Balls always feel better, not by like a whole ton, but they do feel better enough where I feel like the Great Balls are better than the Nest Balls. So I'm a big Great Ball fan in the Colorless Lugia, but I know a lot of people just like playing the Nest Balls. And obviously here, Nest Balls is having success, the Great Balls are having success. So yeah, if you're a Colorless Lugia fan, you haven't tried out some of the stuff that any of these players have tried out, definitely should try out a couple of these things. The Squawkabilly, Great Balls over Nest Balls, Radiant Charizard, no Radiant Charizard, the Luxray. I feel like the Luxray is a kind of a staple at this point, especially like moving forward. I would 100% play Luxray no matter what. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the Radiant Charizard, so I would play that no matter what as well. But I would 100% play the Luxray moving forward, because Colorless Lugia is going to get more popular for sure. After I had this dominant of a performance, there's no way it's any less popular than it has been. So I definitely expect more Colorless Lugia, and it's just a great card in the mirror match. It's also a great card up against Pidgeot Charizard as a way to eventually go boss KO on a Pidgeot. You almost always fall behind in the prize count at some point, not necessarily the prize trade up against Radiant Charizard, but in the prize count specifically, you will fall behind at some point. So you can always get the Luxray into play to threaten that boss KO on the Pidgeot. So yeah, definitely would be rocking the Luxray moving forward. And I think that covers everything I want to say on the Lugia builds. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff to try out if you're a Lugia fan in general, if you want to try out the Lugia stuff. Second place list was a surprise, I think, to pretty much everyone, to maybe besides Nicolo, which was a Arceus deck. We haven't seen an Arceus deck do very well for a while. Yeah, it's definitely been a while since we've seen an Arceus deck do this well. Arceus has kind of fallen off the map recently, and that's mainly due to the popularity of Lost Tina. Charizard can also be tough for Arceus as well, but the main reason Arceus fell off super hard was Lost Tina, but Lost Tina has fallen off itself. Lost Tina was probably only like 6% of the meta at the Sacramento Regional Championships. It didn't do that well overall. There was one in top 16, but I would say its overall performance was definitely underwhelming. So yeah, make some space for Arceus decks once again, perhaps. We'll also take a look at the 9th place list here, actually. I was going to not just look at the top 8, there's also the 9th place list that I'll look at from Braden, which was another Arceus build. But this deck is like really, I mean, it's kind of like classic Arceus B-Barrel. It's got the Arceus in here as the main attacker throughout most games. 2/2 B-Barrel line, 4 Pats at the peak, of course. Decent amount of Judge, 3 Judge, some Ionos as well. So a lot of hand disruption, some other draw supporters in the Melanies, the Serena, and then just stuff for Arceus. Like, there's nothing like too crazy here. The partner attacker, of course, is the Gyarados. I think Nicolo said the reason they went with the Gyarados is it felt like it was the best attacker to help deal with Charizard, to give yourself a better Charizard matchup. Like I said, your Lost Tina matchup is already going to be pretty tough. You kind of give up on that for the most part. It is winnable, but it's tough, especially if you get the V-Guards on the Arceus, though, and you have the Gyarados as a backup against Lost Tina. Once they've used their Star Requiem, it can be hard for them to maybe get that follow-up knockout, but overall, that's always going to be a tough one. So, but for the Charizard matchup, Nicolo said that Gyarados felt like it was good. You can do a play where you attack with the Gyarados' first attack that does 120 damage and discards an energy off the Charizard. If you combo that with a Judge and a Path, it's possible they just don't draw into an energy for turn and can't attack with that Charizard. So you're just trying to like buy a cheesy turn there at some point in the game. And they're just lacking in here as well. Can hit really hard. Definitely saw this potentially coming up in a couple of the stream games that I VOD reviewed of Nicolo. If you want to check me out, my VOD review of Day 2 and Top Cut from Sacramento, go check it out on the secondary YouTube channel, AzulGG2. I put that up over there, so you guys can go watch that over there if you want to check my VOD reviewing of Day 2 and Top Cut. No Day 1. I didn't have enough time to do Day 1 because busy traveling this week as well. So I'm not doing a whole ton of content recently, but I'll get back to it next week. So yeah, the slacking hits really hard as well. 4 energy for 260. You get a choice belt on there. You're doing 290. You KO Lugia V-Stars, Arceus V-Stars, Tina V-Stars. All the V-Stars, like the slacking is just good against the V-Stars for the most part, to be honest. I just want to KOs all of them with the choice belt. So yeah, it's a cool Arceus build. But yeah, I mean, it's just Arceus. It's cool to see Arceus doing well again. And I do feel like there might be some room in the meta for Arceus to maybe make some kind of a comeback. Mostly because Lost Tina has kind of fallen off the map a little bit. And I don't really expect Lost Tina to make a resurgence. I mean, we'll see what happens at Lille Regionals this weekend. But yeah, I'm not predicting a big resurgence from Lost Tina. I don't think it's going to happen. We'll see, though. I guess you never really know. Europe is sometimes a little bit different than North America. Third place list from Sawyer was a Kyogre build. It's a 2-prize Kyogre build. Nothing too different. I think it's the exact same list that Sawyer played at the previous Peoria maybe as well. So yeah, straightforward 2-prize Kyogre. Not really too much to talk about here, to be honest. Just 2-prize Kyogre. Yeah, that's it. I guess the only thing that stood out to me was interesting. Only 1 recycler, but does have the 4 Super Rod, and then the Artisan over like a potential second Pokestop. Interesting as well. But I'm a big fan of the Artisan in Lost Box, to be honest. I also like Beach Court. All the stadiums are really, really good. I think I prefer the Artisan and Beach Court before the second Pokestop, because Pokestop is cool, but sometimes you just want to guarantee do something on your turn, and that you can playing around that guarantee is a little bit more beneficial than like the RNG of the Pokestop. The Pokestop is still really nice to have those more aggressive turns, or have the potential for some really big plays throughout a game, or to help yourself deck out at the end of the game to use Kyogre. So one of Pokestop is still great for all of that. But yeah, heavy Pokestop counts. I've started to like the idea of just like the Artisan, the Beach Court, which we kind of saw Estrada kind of a first do when they won Pittsburgh. So I do like the Artisan in there. 1 Gardevoir in the top 8 and no other Gardevoirs in the top 16 actually, from Ryan Harris. Couple interesting cards in here. So this one feels pretty close to what Brent Tonneson top 8'd Peoria with. It's more the collapsed worker build, but there's a vacuum in here over like the second worker. No Palpad, no Forest Seal Stone, no Luminion. So yeah, just like stuff you need to set up and play the game. I believe Brent Tonneson said just the essentials Gardevoir, just cards that do stuff to set up your Gardevoirs, basically. Nothing too cheesy or anything like that. And did play the Spiritomb as well. The Spiritomb is like an interesting tech. Mew did have a little bit of hype post Peoria because it did get top 4 from Rowan. So the Spiritomb inclusion, I played against a lot of Spiritombs. I think pretty sure 5 of my opponents in the first 7 rounds that I played at Sacramento, maybe 4 had Spiritomb. I played against a lot of Spiritombs. There's a lot of Spiritomb at Sacramento. People like including those one-of cards that kind of just auto win a matchup, and because DTE Mew was like the hyped, more popular build of Mew, Spiritomb not as good against Fusion Mew, way better against DTE Mew, and it basically auto wins the matchup as long as you're doing something and putting Spiritomb in play at the same time. Especially in a Gardevoir deck, I feel like it's really strong, because you just need to buy some time, hope that the Mew player doesn't have too explosive of turns. Spiritomb really slows them down a lot. You get to set up your Gardevoirs more cleanly. Don't have to worry about them disrupting you as aggressively because they can't draw cards with their Genesects to like get those bigger Judge Path plays consistently, and then you can kind of just like take over the game. Also, it is good against Colorless Lugia. Colorless Lugia, or Lugia in general, is pretty reliant on Luminion to consistently play games throughout games, to play cards throughout games, to be able to play the game. So Spiritomb shutting down Luminion can be a pretty powerful component in that matchup. It's not always gonna be a factor though, so generally you don't want to put a Spiritomb in play at the sacrifice of benching Emerald. So if you're a Gardevoir player and you're thinking about including the Spiritomb, or you're gonna include the Spiritomb in your Gardevoir list, don't bench Spiritomb like turn 1, turn 2, unless you know putting Spiritomb in play is gonna lock them out of the Luminion, which you know is their only source to the play they want to pull off on their next turn. Don't not bench a Ralts to put the Spiritomb in play in the early game. Definitely get your 4 Ralts down first. If you can go like 4 Ralts Mew Spiritomb or 4 Ralts Greninja Spiritomb, that's fine. But don't like go 3 Ralts Mew Greninja Spiritomb, because that's only going to start to cut into your own setup. And like if they don't ever have to use the Luminion as a Lugia player, then you just kind of can get screwed. And because of the lack of draw support from Refinement or getting into your next Gardevoir sooner and faster can be what actually loses you the game, even if you get the Spiritomb in play. But in the late game, comboing Spiritomb with Iono at the end of the game against Lugia decks is really good, shutting down the possibility of Luminium for boss and stuff like that. So late game Spiritomb is also really, really strong against them. But moving forward, I'm not a huge fan of the Spiritomb. Like I said, I don't feel like it does that much against the Lugia players. It's like okay as a tech against Lugia. I think the stronger tech would be to include a Temple of Sinnoh, which I would recommend. If you're going to play Gardevoir moving forward, I would definitely include a Temple of Sinnoh. Lugia is the new hype deck for sure. It's going to gain a lot of steam, a lot of popularity. Going to be running into it a lot at tournaments, on the ladder, whatever it is. If you're going to be playing Gardevoir, I would say go ahead and include the Temple of Sinnoh first. Mew, even if everyone cuts their Spiritombs, I don't think Mew is still that good of a deck. Charizard's still pretty popular, still out there. The lists have adjusted a little bit more to be able to deal with that hand lock style of Mew as well. So, yeah, I'm still not thinking Mew's going to be popular enough to want to warrant the Spiritomb. But if you're really trying to tech for the Lugia, which I would recommend, I put the Temple of Sinnoh in. And I know it does conflict with your reversal energy, but you should be able to play around it to the point where it's not going to like lose you games or anything like that. I feel like the Sinnoh is very, very powerful up against the Colorless Lugia. And I guess the last list to take a look at here before, I guess we'll take a look at Braden's. This is my list, and I just played Raymond Long's, basically Raymond Long's Kyogre single prize Lost Box list. The only thing I changed was me and my team, we cut the beach court and we added in the 4th escape rope. That's really the only adjustment we made. 4 escape ropes good with Kyogre is basically the reasoning. The beach court probably would have been fine as well, to be honest. One way or the other, didn't really hurt to have the escape rope or not have the escape rope, so it just kind of felt fine overall. The deck's really good, felt really powerful. The Colorless Lugia matchup is pretty tough, and that was kind of where most of my losses came from, if not all of them. Most of them. I also lost to a Rapid Strike, yeah. So I lost a Colorless Lugia and Rapid Strike. I think those were my only 2 losses in the whole tournament. Besides that, the deck felt solid. It was cool to play Lost Box again. Kyogre's the most powerful attacker in the game, yada yada. Moving forward, I'm not as big of a fan of Lost Box though, because of the hype behind Colorless Lugia, and I think it's going to gain its footing in the meta as being a top tier deck that everyone's going to have to respect. So I'm not as big of a fan of Lost Box moving forward. So I wouldn't recommend playing Lost Box right now, but if you're a diehard fan, the Kyogre build, the non-Kyogre build, definitely play a 2-prize build moving forward because Colorless Lugia will be more popular. So I would recommend, if you're going to play a Kyogre build of Lost Box, probably go with something like Sawyer's build instead, because the 2-prizers do give you a lot better chance against the Lugia builds. I still think it's unfavorable, but having those more explosive big attackers can definitely allow you to keep up in the prize exchange or get ahead in the prize exchange and then kind of maintain your prize lead from there. So definitely go with something like the 2-prizer build. Or if you go with like a more turbo build, that works. Stay away from like the 1-prize Mirage Gate build. Stay away from the Sablezard. Both of those builds, including the 1-prize Kyogre build, not great against Lugia. Neither is the 2-prize build, the turbo build, or the 2-prize Kyogre build. All of them I feel like are unfavored against Lugia, but if you're set on playing Lost Box, go with the 2-prize build for sure. And then the last deck we'll take a look at, because it's a pretty cool list from Braden. Braden's always playing Arceus decks pretty much no matter what. I think maybe no matter what. And came up with a pretty cool build that has a lot of funky stuff going on here. So of course you got the Arceus line, of course you got the B-Barrel line, you got the 3 Paths of the Peak. This is kind of sketch. Why would you not play 4 Paths of the Peak if you're playing Arceus B-Barrel? I don't know about that, Braden. But 1/1 Duraludon in here to basically auto-win the Lugia matchups. This is something that's actually kind of interesting. Are Lugia decks going to have to respect Duraludon again? And then what route should Lugia decks go down to respect Duraludon? Currently, the only real tool that Lugia decks are playing to be able to deal with Duraludon is you can use Mew EX to copy Duraludon's G-Max Pulverization to hit it for 220 damage, but that doesn't KO it. So you could include Paths of the Peaks, you could include a second Mew EX. Do you really want to tech for Duraludon? How popular is Duraludon going to be? Not that popular. I wouldn't recommend teching for Duraludon, but it is one of those things where if you run into it, it's going to feel pretty bad. Also, if they are only playing like a 1/1 Duraludon, you could possibly boss KO the Duraludon V before they get to utilize it. It's pretty tough for Lugia to do that, but it is possible. So that could be your out, I guess. But yeah, Duraludon, definitely something that could pop up in, definitely pop up quite a bit more, I feel like, in comparison to how popular it has been, to just kind of answer the Lugia hype right now. But this build some crazy stuff going on here. Like I mentioned, you got the Duraludon here for the Lugia matchup. You are just an Arceus deck. 2 Mawile in here. You can do funky stuff up against Gardevoir and Charizard, or any deck that just doesn't play a ton of switch cards or runs out of switch cards. You can have an infinite deck with Squovette while you just sit there and Mawile trap them with the Tempting Trap over and over and over again. You can do plays against like Miraidon and stuff where you trap something in the active for a turn. Hopefully they don't hit a switch card, and then clean it up on the next turn with an Arceus attack. Otherwise, Arceus isn't 1-hit KOing it anyways. So there's a lot of funky things you can do with the Mawile. There's 2 of them in here. There's also a Super Rod, so you can get 3 or even 4 Mawiles in a game, possibly. That's a lot of Mawile. So there's a lot of funky things you can do with this list. I haven't played with it, so I haven't fully fleshed out all the game plans with it that Braden probably utilized to win games. So I don't really have too much to say on this. I think it's just a really cool list, and I definitely recommend y'all check it out and try it. If you're a fan of Arceus, you've been wanting to play some Arceus, this is a cool build to pick up and probably give it a shot. A lot of funky things you can do. Also, the Radiant Alakazam in here as well to do some funky stuff against Gardevoir as well. So yeah, pick it up, try it out. Like I said, not too much to comment on. I just thought it was a cool build that Braden brought and ended up getting 9th place with that. Okay, that's my recap of the Sacramento Regional Championships. I guess one last thing. I was going to talk about this when I was talking about the metagame, but we can go ahead and talk about it now. Where do I think the meta is going to go? So let's go back and take a look at the metagame real fast. So day 1 meta, we got Lil Regionals coming up this weekend. So I'm going to give my predictions on these 6 decks, how I think they will fall. Maybe I'll try and predict Mew as well. I'll put Mew. What other deck am I missing? Am I missing another deck? Lost Tina, I think, is going to be about a 6% deck, would be my guess. Maybe 8%. I don't know. Europe can be like different sometimes, but yeah, maybe 6%. Mew will probably also be around 6% off the chart, but these will probably be the top 6 decks again, would be my guess. I could see Mew or Lost Tina squeaking into the top 6. I think those are like all the decks. I'm trying to come up with like, am I missing a deck that would be in, let me see, am I missing a deck that could possibly be in that top 6? I don't think so. Just Mew and Lost Tina would be the 2 that are kind of outside of this top 6 area, I think. Okay, so Lost Box, I think, is going to come down to 10%. That'd be my prediction. Charizard probably will be at the 12%. Miraidon feels like one of those decks where it's going to be more popular in North America than Europe. I don't know if that's actually true, but I just have that feeling. So I'm going to go ahead and predict that Miraidon will be... where do I think Miraidon will fall? Probably 8%. I actually want to... I'm going to go look up the... I'm going to quickly take a look at the numbers from Barcelona and see where if Miraidon was even on the chart in Barcelona. Miraidon was 8% in Barcelona. So I'm going to predict... I'm going to predict 8% for Miraidon. I think Gardy will probably be around 12%. I think Gardy could be the most popular deck at Lil Regionals. I feel like Gardevoir is definitely a deck that is like more popular over in Europe. Qianpao, probably around like a 9%, 10 to 9% deck. And then Lugia, I think, will come back up to a 10 to 12% deck. I'm not sure it'll see like a massive... I don't know if it'll get more than that, more than 12. I don't think Lugia will pass more than 12. So 10 to 12 for Lugia, 10 to 8 for Qianpao, 12 plus for Gardevoir, Miraidon at 8 or 9, Charizard at 12, Lost Box at 10. Those are my predictions for Lil Regionals this weekend. We'll see how close I am when it all goes down this weekend. And that's going to be my Sacramento Regionals recap, future predictions moving past this, and what I thought about the top 8 lists. Let me know what you guys thought about this type of video. Again, I did one for Peoria Regionals. I'll probably do one for Lil Regionals as well. Is there anything else you want me to expand on further? I did take a look at your comments and your comments last time and try to expand on some stuff a little bit further that you guys want to hear more of in this regional recap. Let me know if there's anything else you want to hear me expand on more of in the next regional recap, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.